Okay, so this is Algebra 1-7, Section 1-7, and we're continuing our work with solving equations, but now we have what we call a literal equation. A literal, it's kind of hard to say, equation. And in this case, we're solving for y, but not all of literal equations will always be for y. So we separated this into two sections. We have 1-7, and then we have 1-8. So I'll have two different videos. So literal equation, what this means is that if you look down at this example, we have 2x plus 3y equals 6. Well, notice you have one equation. You have one equation, but two different variables. So you can't just solve, you can't just say x equals 2 or y equals 1. So I'll show you how you can solve this in terms of one of the variables. So in this lesson, you'll learn how to solve problems using equations more than one variable. A literal equation is an equation that involves two or more variables. Okay, now, this is what I want you to understand. When you work with literal equations, you can use the methods you have learned in this chapter in solving equations to isolate any particular variable. So for example, let's just say you didn't have a y here, and you just had 2x plus 3 equals 6. Well, you would subtract 3 and then divide by 2. Okay, so same thing is we want to figure out what we want to solve for. And when we have more than one variable, we need to know which variable we're going to solve for. And we want to solve the equation for y. So this is the variable that we want to end up by itself, isolated by itself. So in this thing, what I would do first, if you knew this is 2x plus 3y equals 6, well, if we want that by itself, we're going to move the 2x. So you're going to subtract the 2x. And the reason I chose to subtract the 2x term because I want y by itself. So I'm going to move the x term to the other side, to the side that it's away from the y. Okay, now, if you notice, you're going to subtract here. That's 0. So you have 3y equals, now I'm going to go ahead and give you a tip. I would put your variable term first. This is a negative 2x. Negative 2x, now that's a positive 6. Now you cannot combine these. You can't do 6 minus 2x is 4x. There's no variable there. So you cannot combine these. You have to leave it like this. Then you want to get y by itself. So this is multiplication. The inverse operation is division. So you're going to divide it. Now here's the tricky part. Every term needs to be divided by 3. So I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3. I like to separate them, so then it's easier for you to see that. But you're going to divide. So now what you want to do is divide by the number, the coefficient, okay, in front of the y, by the coefficient of y, which is the number in front. So that makes that equal 1. Then simplify these terms here. So we have negative 2/3. Do not change to a decimal. Don't change to a decimal. You can leave it negative 2/3 x, and then 6, positive 6 divided by positive 3 is a positive 2. Okay? So then what you want to do is simplify the two fractions. Now, it says, check your answers to see in slope-intercept form. Well, you guys, we haven't learned slope-intercept form formally in Algebra 1. You might know this a little bit from previous, but that is a huge Math 8 concept which we're going to do. So don't worry about this format. You basically are going to have this y. You're going to have some number. That's what the m is. Your x, and then a b. So we're going to talk about that later. So don't get too worked up about that. Okay, so we're going to practice this one. Again, we're going to solve for y. You always need to know which one you're going to solve for. In this case, we have a negative x minus 5y equals negative 10. So again, you're going to move, I want to solve for y, so I'm going to move the x term over to the other side. It says move the x term. Now, this is a negative 1x. To make that 0, I need to add the x. Okay, so then we get a negative 5y again, I would put your x term first. Now this is a 1x. So you can do a 1, actually I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a 1x minus 10. Okay, so you move the x term to the other side away from the y. Now, okay, so you move that x term, sorry, I just got sidetracked. Then divide by your negative 5. Each term is going to be divided by negative 5. Divide by the coefficient of y. Okay, so then that's 1, so this is y. Now be careful here. If you just have x over 5, there's really a 1 there. So this is saying a negative 1/5 x. You have a negative 10 divided by negative 5. It's going to be a positive 2. Okay, and then simplify the two fractions. Okay, now slope-intercept form, we'll get more into that, so don't worry about that. Okay, so now we're going to solve for each of these. Again, solve for y. Okay, you always want to know what you're solving for. In this case, we have y plus 5x equals 6. So this is just a 1y. So this is kind of nice to where we just need to move the 5x to the other side. So y equals a negative 5x plus 6. And then you're done. You don't have to divide by anything because the coefficient is 1. Okay. Number 2. You're solving for y. So subtract 8x. You get a negative, bring that down, negative 4y equals a negative 8x minus 12. Divide by negative 4. These cancel, so you're going to get y equals negative 8 divided by negative 4 is a positive 2. So you're not going to have anything in the denominator at all. So that's a positive 2x. Negative 12 divided by negative 4 is a positive 3. That's a 3. And I would probably circle your answer if it gets a lot of work and you can't see it. Okay, now solve for y. There's nothing I have to move first because the 2x is already on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative 3 on each of these. And it's going to be y equals 2 divided by a negative 3. If one of these are negative, then you can just make the whole fraction negative. So 2/3 x, negative 2/3 x, negative 9 divided by negative 3 is a positive 3. Okay. All right, now look here. We have 5x equals negative y plus 6. Okay, I want to get y by itself. So you could work this a couple of different ways. Now I want a positive y. I could just subtract 6 and make that 5x minus 6, but I have a negative y here. And this is saying a negative 1y. So I'd have to divide by a negative 1. Each of these divide by a negative 1. And you can get a negative 5x plus 6 equals y. That would work. Or I can move the y this way and subtract the 5x this way. If I did that, same thing, I'd get y equals, and I'm going to rewrite that. Negative 5x plus 6. So you could add the y, but then you have to subtract the 5, 6, which is fine too. All right, so this one, 6y equals negative 3x plus 12. Well, that's kind of nice. All I have to do is divide by 6. So I get y equals, don't change that to a decimal, leave it as a fraction, negative 3 divided by 6. 3 is half of 6. So it's going to be a negative 1/2 x, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay, this one, subtract 10x, negative 5y minus 10x plus 5, divide by negative 5. And I like to do every term divide by negative 5. You have to mathematically. But then this is going to be y equals negative 10 divided by negative 5 is a 2 and 2x. Negative 5 plus, or divided by negative 5, a positive 5 divided by negative 5 is a negative 1. Okay, so that's how you solve literal equations when you solve for y. What this is doing is getting us set up for slope-intercept form. So just get in the habit of getting that x term first. That'll really help you. So that is how you solve literal equations for one variable.